Hey everyone, Bernard here with the latest Citizen Past vlog. So this is part 4 of our history of Manchester City. Please, parts 1 to 3 are all in the connections. How to find the links to those are all in the comments below. So please have a look back if there's any of the first 3 parts you want to look back on. Please push the subscribe button if you're new to the channel. And please the bell notification so you know these little Citizen Past vlogs are coming out. Obviously, if you've been with me before, you know we do Citizen Present as well, which is all about City now. But anyway, this is City's history. This is the things that we do, a couple of these every month. So this is part 3 of Manchester City history, and we've got to 1914, 1915. So we're going to look at 1914-15 season to 1923-1924 season. I've got various help from various things. The Manchester City Ray Goble, Andrew Ward, a lot of information on there. I've used Gary James's Manchester City Years, which I've only got a Kindle version. I can't show you the book to that. 120. This was given away with a season card a few years back. Stuff in there, my own stuff, that's scrapbooks and stuff I've collected. And obviously this Manchester City Moments to Remember, stuff taken from John Creighton's stuff. So my thanks to all these people and various other people's on Wikipedia, etc., that I've got this information together. Anyway, so let's start this part 4, 1914-15. Well, we were at war, weren't we? 1st of September 1914, the season kicked off, and Britain were at war. But you know, dedicated. We've got to carry on. We've got to carry on with the season. But obviously, what's obviously a bit of leeway, wasn't there? I mean, obviously, players were actually just signing up for the war and going to work in various ammunition factories and stuff like this. So it's an interesting time. And obviously, if you've watched the other two, you can see City crowds are amongst the biggest in the UK, in English football in the UK, the City crowds. But obviously, it's noticeable over the next few years. Obviously, those crowds, you know, you do get the odd bigger crowd, but obviously we're a lot smaller. So instead of getting 40,000 maximum crowds at Hyde Road, that was a reported crowd. Obviously, there's perhaps more than that. The 1914-15 season, it was like 25,000 crowds. So they weren't quite as good, but we can all understand why, can't we, in 1914-15. Defensively, City were very good this season, and we had a really good team. We really did very, very well in 1914-15. Again, you know, it's a disaster, obviously, the World War, but City, unfortunately, probably had one of the better teams of the first history. You know, they had some good teams, obviously. Walter Smith, who'd been in and out of goal, was on fire in goal for City. He was one of the regular goalkeepers during the 1914-15 season. We even equalled the British transfer record as well for a football. We actually purchased Horace Barnes from Derby County for a wonderful amount of £2,500. And in the league, we'd done really well. We'd actually were doing very, very well. I mean, you had teams like Oldham, Blackburn, Everton, Burnley, and Manchester City, all Lancashire clubs up at the top. So it was quite interesting that we were having a really good tilt at the title. Up to about the last 5 games, we had a game with Oldham about 5 games from the end, which ended in a disappointing draw. But if you look at the actual final table of that season, there's the actual table, how the season finished. You see Everton winning it. But look at the points. There's hardly any points in it. But, I mean, the City, sadly, of the last 5 games, we had 2 draws and 3 defeats. So if we'd performed a little bit better, we would have actually won the league that season. I mean, that was just we'd certainly petered off. And as I say, under difficult circumstances, not just City, every team are obviously under difficult circumstances with the war, etc. But we were so close. I mean, we finished 5th in the end. And that was the nearest Oldham came to ever winning it as well, which is a shame for them, for Oldham fans. But yeah, it was such a shame that obviously the last season we did well. We knew that then probably by the time we got to May 1915, we knew there wasn't going to be another full English League season. So to finish runners up, fifth was pretty good, but a bit disappointing when we had sort of a chance to actually win the title. But there's more serious things going on, wasn't there? The 1915-16 season led to a regionalisation. I mean, they wanted to keep playing the football, but obviously there was not going to be any league for a few years now while the World War I was going on. And strangely enough, as you notice from that last table, the top 5 teams are all Lancashire teams. So we would play in a sort of Lancashire league. So it was quite a higher standard that a regional league we actually played in for the 1915-16 season. And obviously we still have players joining up. And if you look at the squad rotation, the squad names in the book of who was playing, I mean, it gets longer and longer because obviously players in and out, and there's a lot of inconsistency. So there was no cup, there's no FA Cup to play anymore, which we hadn't, from the 1904 when we hadn't done that great in it anyway. We'd had 1 or 2 okay runs, but that was it. The crowds remained low, as you'd expect. I mean, the biggest crowd at Hyde Road was a match against Manchester United. And then we actually went on to win it. We actually went on to win this regional league, and then it split into the top teams played in the subsidiary league. And obviously we went on to win that as well. So we actually, even though it's not classed as a major trophy, we actually did win. And if you think about it, the best teams were in the Northwest. So we actually did win. So obviously if they hadn't been a World War One, hey, if some buts, but I mean, City were probably had a good chance of actually winning a league a long time before they actually did accomplish that feat. But they actually won these regional leagues anyway, which is really good. One notable thing in 19 was actually the Billy Meredith came back to City in this season. After 11 years at Manchester United, he had a bit of, even though he was still a United player, he actually was back on City's books, which obviously he'll be mentioned again a bit later on in this little history thing. So Billy Meredith comes back, the legend Billy Meredith comes back from United. Obviously, if you watch my other things, he left City in the scandal with the FA back in the mid 1900s. So it was great to welcome Billy Meredith back. So that was pretty good. I mean, we never quite attained those heights again in this regional league. We never quite did, as I said, but it was a very, very funny time with new footballers coming in and changing all the time, etc. In 1916-17, Stoke and Port Vale were added to the Northwest Regional League, so we had a few more crowds. The biggest crowd was only 15,000 at Hyde Road against United again. We actually finished 4th in the Regional League and 3rd in this. Then went on to play 3rd in the subsidiary league. Lots of players playing again. So again, that was the 1916-17 season. 1917-18 season, again, a mixed bag. Fifth on the regionals, 3rd in the subsidiary. The biggest crowd again was we had a 2 or 3 20,000 crowds. So again, not massive crowds. 1918-19 obviously started before the end of the war. 1918-19. So again, it was still these regional leagues. Although in the air, obviously it was September, so we knew perhaps the war was going to be coming to an end at some stage. Again, we finished 5th in the subsidiary league, but we actually won we finished 5th in the regional league, but we actually won the subsidiary league of obviously the best team. So we actually won that again. So that was twice we'd sort of won the overall thing over the war years. And the first home game after the announcement of the peace and the World War One ending was against Liverpool, and it was a slightly bigger crowd than normal. It was 25,000, obviously not up to the 40,000 we were used to getting years before, but it was significant that the biggest crowd of the season was the game after the armistice game, after peace was declared. It was a 2-0 defeat, unfortunately, against Liverpool, but 25,000. So, again, you could see the crowds were slightly coming back. We never quite recover just yet, over certainly at Hyde Road to what we were getting pre-war, but still a good crowd. So it led us to 1919-1920, which was the return of the Football League. And obviously, doubts were now being made about Hyde. Hopefully the crowds would come back. Obviously, Hyde Road had been used partly as a stables during the war for horses, etc. So it got a bit of rack and ruin, even though obviously they were still playing football. Billy Meredith went back to United. He went back to his club. He'd never left United as far as being on the wage, on the wage force was concerned. But he had obviously been playing for City. But City needed to remain a top club now, and war was over. They needed to look towards the future a little bit. I mean, the FA Cup was back. We only got to the second round. We got beat by Leicester. We were 7th in the league, so not a bad, obviously you would, not too bad again, not great, not too bad, but our crowds improved up to about 30,000 for the bigger games. And games were being played in 1919 on consecutive Saturdays, so you'd play one team one Saturday and then at home and then away the next. And you got some funny results. Yeah, you got where you beat teams twice on the trot, but you also got where you could beat a team 4-1 and then you go up to their ground and lose 4-1 as well. So it was a funny time with the consecutive Saturdays. And Walter Smith played his last game for City in 1919-20, which was a 3-3 draw at Old Trafford, where he had an absolute nightmare. And he went on to he moved to Port Vale shortly after. But that was the end of the wonderful Walter Smith that we've seen before, obviously, in these things. And he went to Port Vale. The most memorable game was 27th of March 1920. So, I mean, near, when I'm recording this, almost 100 years ago, very close to being 100 years ago. And we played Liverpool and we won 2-1 with Barnes scoring both goals, the guy we mentioned earlier on. But the interesting thing was the King came, King George, I think King George V came, and it's the first time he'd ever attended a game outside of London. I mean, they've got a picture there of him being presented to the teams. I mean, this is a thing for Tommy Johnson, one of the great players of that time. Special little cutouts, etc., that are put together. But there's the King being presented. I mean, it was quite funny because the new goalkeeper, Jim Goodchild, our other guy had left. What was his name? Walter Smith had left, and the new goalkeeper always wore his cap, but he's got his cap off out of respect for the King there. But that's a great picture of the King being introduced to players at Hyde Road. A great honour. I mean, it was said by the Northern press that the King enjoyed City's win and was rooting for City. I mean, how much poetic license was used there, I'm not quite too sure. And there was a crowd of 35,000, but they actually shut the gates. So if we've had previous problems at Hyde Road, they actually shut the gates half an hour before the game started to make sure there was no crushes or breaking down of entrances to try and get them, which had happened at Hyde Road before, obviously. But the papers did say the King was happy and everything went off without a hitch, and we even won the game. So that was nice, wasn't it? But the days of Hyde Road were coming to an end, weren't they? I mean, apparently Hyde Road had a fantastic atmosphere. I mean, people commenting at the time, supporters, etc., loved the atmosphere. They had a kids section for kids, etc., and the humour and the atmosphere was superb at Hyde Road. And they did want to stay nearby. They did want to stay around Bellevue Way, where the Bellevue Greyhound Stadium was built, and around that area. They did want to, because obviously that's where the core element of City support were. But we started 1920-21 at Hyde Road, and things were pretty good on the pitch. But unfortunately, there was a little bit of a disaster off the pitch, which happened on the 6th. Now, it's anywhere between the 6th of November and the 10th of November. I'm not quite clear on the date of this, but there was a major fire which absolutely, again, thanks to this image there, actually destroyed the main stand, absolutely. And it was attributed to a cigarette butt being thrown away by. So, I mean, because it was 6th of November, people were saying it was to do with bonfire night, etc. But apparently not. Apparently it was just a stray cigarette stub, which we all know many, many years later with the Bradford disaster, with these wooden stands. I mean, but this, fortunately for us, and fortunately for City at the time, it was obviously overnight. So there was no potential of any of that being obviously any danger to life, etc. But it absolutely decimated the Hyde Road ground. So all these murmurings of moving obviously were sort of getting a bit more of a nudge, weren't they, by things happening off the pitch. Old Trafford was offered to City to play at Old Trafford. Obviously, we know I think it held 80,000 at the time. It was a big ground. They weren't filling it very often, but it was a massive ground. But apparently, they wanted too much rent, so it's not unlike United not to try and do the dirty on us. So, strangely enough, by the 20th, we played our next home game away. So it should have been at home to Huddersfield, but we actually played them away. But by the time the 20th of November came, which was a game against United, they'd actually rebuilt the grandstand, believe it or not. I mean, they'd actually put it all back together. So some feat of achievement to actually read. Obviously, it wasn't to the standard, but there was a grandstand built on the original thing with it. So within the space of less than 2 weeks, absolutely superb. You wouldn't get that now, would you? But and we did, the new grandstand built. There's a 40,000 crowd, so I mean, no real detriment to the crowd. So that was actually built for that United game. Let me check how we did in that. I've not made a note of how actually the score ended. I think it could have been a draw. Let me just have a look at this little book here that tells me everything I need to know. Yeah, it was. We played the United away on the 20th of November, and we drew 1-1 in front of 66,000, a good crowd at Old Trafford. But on the 27th of November, yes, we played back at Hyde with the new grandstand, and we won it 3-0 in front of a crowd of 40,000. So that was superb. Some great work there. We had a guy called Max Woosnam who'd become the new star, one of the new stars for City. He was actually an amateur, but he actually worked at Crossley's Engineering, an old firm in that area, Crossley Engineering. He was an amateur, but obviously I think he got fined once for not going to work and playing for City. But apparently after that they sorted it out, so he could always play for City. So even though he did get fined for it, so things like that were always that. Even though the war had finished, those things were still happening now. Sadly, 26th of March in 1921, there was a bit more crowd trouble. We had too many again in the old problem with Hyde Road. And it was a game against Burnley, which was a crucial game at the top of the table. We were going for it again. I mean, this is. We actually lost it 2-1, but we actually lost the league title to Burnley that season as well. We had 4 wins out of the last 5 games, but it wasn't enough. We actually finished second to Burnley. But crowd trouble at the end of March when we played Burnley, where just too many people, and people broke down gates to get into the game, and there were crushes, etc. So again, not for the first time. Hopefully that was the last time though that City actually had crowd trouble. But runners up in the first division, so close to 1920-21. Again, nothing in the FA Cup, but so close to doing it. And it was interesting actually during 1920-21. I mean, when you think about how quick the grandstand was rebuilt. I mean, there's a little quote in the Glasgow Evening Times by the November, December of that time, saying that Manchester City must have some good friends. They are the most popular club in Manchester. So I mean, obviously we know that, don't we? Still are. So that was nice to see. 1921-22. So after finishing runners up, would we move on from there? No, this is City, probably not. But the one interesting thing of 1921-22 was the return of Billy Meredith at the age of 47. So I mean, 47 years old. I think he played his last game for City at 49. I think I might mention that in a bit. And he came back to City. And it was interesting, before a game against United on the 22nd of October, 1921, some wag, some overnight had gone into Hyde Road and painted the railings around the pitch red and white. So some, whether it's one guy or a few, I don't know. But fortunately, the groundsman arriving early on the day of the derby match had noticed, and by the time we kicked off, they'd been painted back to blue and white. So that was quite interesting. But the United fans, they like a little bit of fun, don't they? Even in those days, they liked a little bit of fun, and we actually went on to win that game 4-1. Unfortunately, the aforementioned Mr. Woosnam suffered an injury at the end of this season, which effectively finished his career. He was only actually going to make another 5 appearances within the next 3 years, so it effectively ruined his career, unfortunately, during that season. And it was announced at the end of 1921-22 that Manchester City would be moving to, not Bellevue, to Moss Side, just on the borders of Rusholme. A 16.25 acre site had been purchased. Plans for 100, and this is a small club mentality of Manchester City. I've said this to a few guys who say we've always been a small club, etc., apart from the Arab money. 120,000 capacity envisaged. This is for a small club. I mean, this is 1920. This is 1922. City were not a small club. We're still not a small club. So don't ever listen to that. And the first phase of this 120k capacity was a little bit less. The first phase would be 15,000 seated stand plus 55k standing. So the first phase of this 120 capacity would be just be a 70,000 capacity stadium, with the second phase coming at a later day, and it was to be based on Hampden Park, which was the biggest ground, and not Wembley. Wembley wasn't even thought of when the plans for Maine Road were put out. So people used to say about Wembley the North, but it was more in line with Hampden Park, who obviously had up to 120,000 capacity at Hampden Park, I think, at the time. So lots of ambition there. So we would start our 1922-23 season, last season at Hyde Road. So again, not great, a little bit disappointing on the pitch that season. Finishing 8th overall. Obviously during the 1922, obviously we had the first Wembley final back in April 1922 as well. And that was actually the people who built Wembley were the people building Maine Road at the time this 1922-23 season was going on. And the last league game at home was a game against Newcastle. So that was the last game at Hyde Road. It wasn't a massive crowd, I don't think. Let's have a check on the crowd for that one, 1922-23. The last Hyde Road game. Yeah, it was a win. It was a draw, a 0-0 draw in front of 20,000. So it wasn't a massive crowd. We hadn't quite hit the heights of other seasons, but that was our last home game. And there's actually got some images of the Newcastle match there at the last home game ever at Hyde Road. Some images there, some action images of that game. So obviously, but it was mixed emotions. It was mixed emotions, to be honest with you, because a lot of obviously fans from Gorton and Hardwick around there said they're not going. They wouldn't go. It was too, having to go up to Rusholme and Moss Side. No, so as you'd expect with any sort of move like that, the guys who live on the doorstep are not very impressed with having to catch a tram to all of a sudden watch a game, a few miles away. So there was a lot of things about that. So obviously 1923-24 season, welcome to Maine Road. The English Hampden is what it was nicknamed, rather than Wembley of the North, which was a bit wrong because it was designs for this were there before Wembley was even thought of, to be honest with you. So it was actually opened up, and it actually came in at 85,000 capacity. So even though we had less seating, the seating had been reduced from 15,000 to 10,000. There was actually more room for 20,000 more standing spectators. So there's again an image in the thing of the layout of the ground, giving the different figures for the different stands, and obviously the map in the middle is showing where it is for people who are living outside of that area. So that's like the plans there. So you've got accommodation for 25,000 spectators, 60 terraces, which would be the Platt Lane eventually. Accommodation for 20,000 spectators, 90 terraces, which was the Kippax, was actually a little bit smaller than the original Platt Lane. Accommodation for 25,000 spectators, 60 terraces, what would be the scoreboard end, and the grandstand. Accommodation for 10,000 spectators. So yeah, that had been reduced from 15,000, but overall, and only just one covered side as well. Don't forget, Hyde Road had been covered on all 4 sides, which is one of the main selling points. But despite this, obviously, it's still one of the best grounds in England when it opened. Built by McAlpine, and built very quickly again. I mean, absolutely from start to finish. I mean, talking probably less than 12 months. So absolutely superbly done by McAlpine there, who got a lot of credit, even though the old Gortonians and Hardwickians were disappointed with the move. So that meant Billy Meredith had played at 4 Manchester venues now. He'd played at Hyde Road, Clayton, obviously playing United in the old days, Old Trafford for United, and now played at Maine Road. And it coincided 93-24. Obviously, it was a year after the first Wembley final, with the White Horse final, with a good cup run, and the biggest crowd of the season to fit into Maine Road that season. It was 76,166 against Cardiff City, because obviously a lot of Welsh fans came over because of the Billy Meredith link. Obviously, they wanted to come over for that, and he was 49 at the time. Absolutely amazing. It was a quarter final against Cardiff, who actually drew at Maine Road and actually beat them then in the replay. But sadly, the FA Cup, we were strong favourites, we were actually beaten in the semi-final, unfortunately, by Newcastle. So that was a bit disappointing. The other big crowd, the first game at Maine Road, the first game in the 1923-24 season was against Sheffield United, the 3-1 win. And we've got an image of, I think it's the Lord Mayor being introduced to the team. That was the first game at Maine Road. Right. It wasn't the big, it was 56,993 for that very first game. So that's a good crowd, 56. You think our 40,000 was our best ever crowd at Hyde Road. So obviously, again, we weren't going to fill it every week. They were not like, that's how it is, isn't it? United had an 80,000 stadium, but obviously crowds were nowhere near reaching that capacity most games. Even against City, they'd only get anywhere between 60, 66,000, etc. So it was a 3-1 win in front of 56,993. United were actually in Division 2 though then as well, 1923-24. So we didn't have the opportunity of seeing how many we could have got for Maine Road. Obviously that opportunity would come, but obviously not just yet. Another player that joined us was Sam Cowan. Joined us, another well-known name. Came from in 1924 from Doncaster Rovers. There's an image of him. Sam Cowan, another name, another sort of to become a very well-known City player. First season at Maine Road wasn't the greatest. We ended up finishing 11th. And at the end of the season, obviously, as you remember, our manager, Ernest Magnol, who came from Manchester United, which was compared to Ferguson leaving United at his prime and coming to City. This Ernest Magnol, who had promised a lot, didn't he? He thought he could do a lot with City, but obviously we did come close a couple of times to league glory, but not really in the FA Cup. But his contract was not renewed at the end of that season. So obviously when we come back for his part 5 of this history thing, we'll be looking for a new manager. But the Ernest Magnol, the manager, his contract was not renewed. So from tabletop in the War Regional League to runners up again, obviously just so near, we were so near to winning it again that season. To a new ground with potential for massive crowds. No Wembley trip, no trips to a final, was there, unfortunately. We got to a semi-final, but no trips to Wembley. But hey, perhaps that'll come in the next 10 years or so, who knows. So please. It was an interesting 10 years, wasn't it? It was an interesting 10 years, a great history. So I've only touched upon certain things. I mean, especially that Gary moments, but Gary Jane's book I mentioned earlier on, please. That's absolutely fantastic. He goes into great detail on different players, etc. And it should be available on Kindle. The Manchester City Years by Gary James. Please check that out for more detail. This is just a skimming of it, really, and a little bit of information, a bit of facts for you on this sort of 10 years. So thank you for watching this with me. So please, hopefully you can join me for part 5. Obviously, we'll be looking at FA Cup finals, perhaps relegations again. We got away with relegations the last 10 years, didn't we? That I've just done now. The first league derby at Maine Road. How did that pan out? What sort of crowd did we get? And yeah, some record crowds, some big crowds. We've got a big ground now, haven't we? We're not going to feel like any ground. I mean, apparently you can't have empty spaces these days. But obviously in those days, you could have an 80,000 ground and get 30,000 in it. No one batted an eyelid. But obviously that's a different time, isn't it? You know what I mean? But it was there. Build it and they will come. Anyway, thanks for joining for this today. Please check out my other little city in the comments below, my other little cities and vlogs, City Past. I mean, there's a March 1992, month of March 1992 vlog out there. I'll put it in the links below. Please check that out. So if you want to go back to 1992 and relive a very interesting month of March, and obviously you've got parts 1 to 3 of this city history, please check back and watch that. That'll be absolutely fantastic. Tons of stuff. City new, City old, whatever. If you're a City fan, please join me for these little looks and little unique looks at stuff. I try and do something a little bit different to what's out there. So please tell your friends, tell your mates, etc. And you can get them to subscribe. Absolutely fantastic. Thanks. Much appreciated. Thumbs up's are nice. Anyway, thanks for joining me for this little 30-minute look, part 4 of City's history from where we've gone from 1914 to 1924. So join me for 1924-25 onwards in the next, in part 5 of the history of Manchester City. Anyway, this is Bernard saying thanks for watching. What I'm going to do with the rest today, have a great one. Look after yourself, look after your friends, and more importantly, look after your family. And hopefully I'll see you all again very soon. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.